Well, I'm very excited about my guest today. His name is Scott Mautz, and he's absolutely one of my favorite people, which is why he's a returning guest on the show. And Scott and I got to know each other when we both worked at the Procter and Gamble company, which seems like a lifetime ago now. Now, today, Scott is a keynote speaker, a best-selling author, a faculty member at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. He also writes for Inc. magazine, where he has over 1 million readers a month. And he's also the CEO and founder of Profound Performance, where he teaches audiences how to reach and sustain peak performance through emotional intelligence. And as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, he's just a gorgeous man. Scott, welcome back to the show.
I don't know if I'm any of that, but great to be here again, Paul. Thanks for having me here. That's why we have flowers here to pretty up the
That's right.
set, because it's just you can only do so much.
Oh, very clever. I see what you just did there.
Yeah,
So, okay. Now, the last couple of times I had you on the show, we were talking about your previous books. So, Make It Matter and Find the Fire. And this time we're here to talk about your newest book, which is Leading from the Middle, a playbook for managers to influence up, down, and across the organization. And if I could summarize, I think all three of these, and correct me if I'm wrong, but give me a chance to give me a stab at this. One of those was about being the boss, the first one. One of them was about being a better employee, a better, more highly motivated, more rewarded employee. This one is kind of in between, right? It's about, it's kind of somebody that has to do both of those things. Is that right?
that's right. It's about the beloved middle manager, the which becomes a dirty word too, doesn't it, Paul? Like we say middle manager, and everyone hides their face. I
Yeah.
think it's because of the Dilbert cartoons and The Office, with Michael
Yeah.
Scott. They've gotten a bad name, but I'm going to turn that
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. So that's, well, I don't want to say this book is for Michael Scott because nobody would buy it, but it's for somebody who both has to lead an organization and they're still an employee themselves and they got a boss and probably a boss and a boss's boss's boss. So they got to manage both directions, right? That's who this book is for, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Some people will say, okay, all right, so this is for middle managers. How do I know if I'm a middle manager? How
Yeah.
do you describe that? And the definition is really pretty simple, Paul. It's if you have a boss and are a boss, and if you have to lead up the organization to your boss and influence your boss's thinking, if you have to lead down to your direct reports, and if you have to lead across to teams and to influence peers over whom you have no formal authority, then you're a middle manager. Welcome to the club.
Okay.
You should feel proud of that.
Exactly. Which, by the way, has been most of us for most of our careers. So
That is correct. That is
yeah.
correct.
Okay. All right. So to help us understand kind of the unique challenges that middle managers face, how about you start by telling us about Justin, who you write about in the book?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Justin's name has been disguised to protect the innocent, and it's a story. Hey, this is a podcast about stories, so I wanted to open up with a one that really amused me, Paul. It's a story that helped me figure out. All right, I can't sit on this any longer. I have to write this book for these poor middle managers that are in the middle. So I had just given a keynote at a conference that was actually based right inside a headquarters of a pretty large size company. And I'd gotten done. And Paul, you're a keynoter. You know the process. Like you get done, you get off the stage, and if you're lucky, people want to talk to you afterwards, and they line up and they want you to sign their book, and they have questions to ask. And so I was going through that process, and this wonderful guy named Justin at this company came up to me, and he was kind of assigned to me to handle me that day. You're a big time, Paul.
Yeah.
You have handlers.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Exactly.
talking
Oh, of
about, right?
course.
You need the green M&Ms in your room dressing room.
That's
That's
right.
the
Me and David
this is
Lee Roth
Justin.
both. Yeah. Yeah.
You and David Lee. So Justin came up to me and said, "Hey Scott, we got to get you out of here, because you got to catch your plane. So let me take you back to my desk where I've stored your stuff." He gracefully pulls me out of that. We walk back, we wind through the headquarters, through all the cubicles. I'm in cubicle land now, right?
Mhm.
After 18 turns and through cubicles, we get to his cubicle, and he's got my stuff sitting there. And he says, "Hey, I got to grab something. I'll be right back. Hold on, I'll walk you to the door." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Your Uber is waiting for you." So I said, "Great." So I'm standing there with nothing to do in the middle of cubicle farmland, right? And I look at Justin's desk, and it is clean as a whistle, but there's three pieces of paper up on his cubicle wall that you just can't miss sitting next to each other. One is a piece of paper. It says Manager Directives. Next to it is a big picture of a monkey. And then next to that is a picture. All that's on it is 5%, right? So of course this grabs my curiosity. Like, what is this all about? Nothing else is out but these 3 pieces of paper. So I looked closer at the manager directives, and I read it and I couldn't help but laugh out loud. It was a directive that apparently every middle manager in his company got from their management. And here's what it said. Right now, Justin isn't back at his desk yet, so at this point, I'm snooping.
Yeah,
Okay,
clearly.
but I'm looking at his desk, and I have it written down here. Here's what the manager's directive piece of paper said: Your job is to build a close relationship with your staff, but keep a suitable distance. Trust your staff, but keep an eye on them. Be, be tolerant, but know how you want things to work. Keep your department's goals in mind, but be loyal to the firm first. There's 2 more of these. Do a good job of planning your time, but be flexible to drop things at any moment. Freely express your view, but be very diplomatic at all times. So I'm thinking, like,
Wow.
this has to be a joke. It's a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Justin comes back. He had gotten something. So I'm like, Justin, what is this? He said, oh, no, that's real. That was handed down to us from our upper management for all the middle managers that, here in Cubeland. This is
Yeah.
our directives. And I said,
Yeah.
that's
Thanks
what
for the
life is
help,
like
boss.
here? Yeah. He's like, that's exactly what life is like here. And I said, well, that doesn't explain the picture of the monkey. So he looks at me, he says, oh. The monkey refers to a study that he came across conducted by the universities of Liverpool and Manchester in England. And he describes the study to me, and then he hands it to me because he keeps a copy of the study. And the study was done, these researchers took a look at the hierarchy of monkeys. They spent over 600 hours studying monkeys, and up and all the way from the newest born monkey to the papa boss monkey of the whole hierarchy. And they studied their behaviors, and like aggressive behaviors like slaps and screeches, and they studied submissive behaviors like retreating, and they studied behaviors like nurturing, of grooming. But then the key part of the study was then they measured the fecal matter of all the monkeys, which is a duty that literally I'll leave up to you, Paul. That's not for me. But they would measure
Thanks.
the fecal matter to measure the stress hormones in the monkey poop. And what they found was the most stressed out monkeys in the hierarchy. Get ready for it. Here comes the punchline. Were the ones that were in the
Mm,
dead middle of the hierarchy that had to manage
mm,
up to their monkey boss, down to their children, and
mhm,
across. And by far, they were the most stressed out. He told me about the study. He says,
mm,
we have a joke around here. We call ourselves the monkeys in the middle because this is what we feel like. We're more stressed out
mm,
than anybody else. And I said, okay, 1 more piece of paper. There's that 5%. What does that mean? He said, now that's a reminder of another study. He pulls out another study out of his drawer. He hands it to me, and he says, this is a study from Oxford University, which shows that at any given point in time, the bottom 5% in any company, the bottom 5% of people that are the most disengaged and the unhappiest, they're not the people that have the worst performance ratings. They're not the people that are brand new and they're in a terrible job that they don't realize isn't a good fit for them. The bottom 5% in terms of unhappiness are ones with good performance ratings that have been at their organization about 5 to 10 years in middle level roles.
mm.
In other words, the middle managers.
Yeah.
So I looked at him and I said, so this is like a shrine to how difficult your job is as a middle manager. Like, I'm like, you don't have to feel trapped, dude. Like you're a good guy. I'd gotten to know him a little bit. You can
Mm,
call me. And here's the punchline of the whole story. This line made it into the book. He looks at me and says, no, Scott, this is just all up there as a shrine to remind me of how difficult the job is. But, you know, I'm not stuck in the middle. I have a chance to lead in every direction.
mm,
What a blessing.
mm.
And it was in that moment that I knew this book needs to get written
Yeah.
because there's so many middle managers out there just like Justin that are in an incredibly difficult role that have so many hats to switch and they become so exhausted. My researchers show me, Paul, that one of the key causes of exhaustion amongst middle managers is the fact of what's called micro switching. They have to switch hats all day long. So and you remember this from your own
Mm,
corporate days, Paul. You could have in one
mhm,
meeting, you have to be deferential to your boss, assertive with your
mhm.
employees, collaborative with your peers, all in one meeting. And that switching is incredibly exhausting. And Justin was describing, all the things that I describe in the book, all the unique challenges of middle managers. But he was embracing them and mentally reframing them as an opportunity to lead in every direction. That all the hats he had to wear fit into one role that he felt blessed to be able to play. And that's when I knew I had to write this book.
So Justin's not an example of somebody who's in this terrible lot in life. He's stuck in middle management and he hates it and he's not doing very well at it. And Justin's not the guy that needs to read your book. Justin sounds like he's figured out part of the solution that you're writing about, and it's starting with his attitude, right? So the mindset that Justin had sounds like the right mindset for somebody in middle management.
That is exactly right, Paul. And one of the profound insights that I talk about in the book is that the ones that do the best are the ones that can mentally reframe. And in the keynote and in the book, I talk about some other powerful reframes I heard, like one that I absolutely love that I wrote down. I was talking to a very successful middle manager who just got done describing a lot of what Justin described to me. But then she said to me, but my job is to think like an engineer and feel like an artist here in the middle. And that's what I do all day long. And when I'm having a bad day and things are getting out, I mentally reframe and I remind myself, think like an engineer, do work in process, get things done, have order, have a system to everything, but at the same time, have heart, have empathy, feel like an artist. And in the book, I talk about 4 or 5, it's just really powerful, even more than that, reframes. I also heard, I'm here to work on the business and in the business. I'm the only one that has the ability to do that here in the middle. I heard another one that stuck with me, which is I'm a lighthouse and a beacon. I signal dangers to everybody else all around me in the organization, and I pull everybody all around me to the right opportunities, a lighthouse and a beacon. And I found that the most successful middle managers have those mental reframes. And that's who this book is for, the people that are looking for the help in how to succeed in the middle. And it starts with mental reframing.
Yeah, good. Okay, so let's do this. I think your book is probably full of tips for how to succeed, as it says in the title, up, down, and across. Now, obviously, we can't summarize the whole book, so let's do this. Can you give my listeners one tip to lead up, one to lead down, and one to lead across?
Yeah, you bet. It's packed with so many. I'll start with the leading up. I'll start with probably the most common questions I get. And I go in the book, I talk through what I call kind of a managing up staircase, Paul. It's a 6 steps, step-by-step process for how to really influence your boss, develop a great relationship with him or her and move up. But I'm going to focus on kind of popular demand. The question I get most often is, okay, holy moly, I got to manage up with my boss. And guess what? I have to disagree with him or her. And I have to give him feedback, and I don't want to do that. Like that's like a nightmare for me. So one of the things I talk about is, how to disagree with your boss is 3 simple steps. The first thing is to always discuss intent before content. And if you think about yourself in the corporate days, Paul, this probably makes a lot of sense to you. Where we go wrong oftentimes when we want to push back on our boss is that we just launch into what it is we want to say, and our boss can get thrown back. And if you don't make it clear on what your intent is before you share the content, things can go wrong very quickly. So you start with something like, instead of drilling right in and saying what's wrong and why you disagree, you start with, hey, Paul, you and I struck an agreement a long time ago that I could be candid with you. Hey, I respect you and your position, man, and you made a lot of really bright calls. I got to admit, this one I'm a little bit different. So my intent here is to kind of point out how I might do things differently, but onto the content. Intent before content. Second step is you have to be respectfully candid, and those are 2 big words, right? Respectful and candid. And if you can't be candid, you're not going to get to what it is you're trying to do. And if you're respectful, you earn the right to be candid. And then the final step, which is tricky, you have to avoid judgment words as well. Where people go really wrong is when it all starts to seem accusational, and they start to say, yeah, and the reason why this isn't right is because, and then the language starts to turn into what feels like a dose of judgment to the boss, and things can go really south from there. And then that's also important for when you have to actually give feedback, and the simple, the rules of disagreeing with your boss are close to feedback, which is, you got to be brave, direct, honest, specific, and with empathy. So that's the one power tip I give for leading up, and I go a lot more of that into that book. Does that make sense? Seem consistent with whenever it blew up on you?
Yeah, and as you're describing these things, they're all starting to kind of come back into my mind of things that, of course, have happened to us being in those leadership team meetings where you're right, you're managing up and down and sideways. So that's a set of tools for leading up. So
yes,
share intent before content. Um, Remind me the second two real quick.
Respectful candor.
Respectful, but yet candid. And the third,
Yep. Avoid judgment
avoid
words.
judgment words. Okay. All right. That's to help you lead up. Lovely. All right. What about
That's right.
down?
Down, I'm going to go with popular demand again. By far, and there's so much I could talk about, and I talk about in the book. The number one question I get is related to feedback on down as well. By far, the number one question. How do I give feedback in a way that my people will listen to it and hear it?
And view it as a
First
gift.
of all, you have to avoid and view it as a gift. First of all, you have to avoid all the things we do wrong, which I get into in the book. What I'm going to just talk about now is very quickly. Here's the rules of giving feedback on down the path. First of all, be specific. My grandpa used to say, white bread ain't nutritious. And what he meant is if you give bland, generic feedback, like that's not going to nurture anybody. It has to be whole grain bread with with real ingredients in there to help. It's got to be specific. It's got to be sincere.
Yeah.
If it comes from the heart, it sticks in the mind. It has to be calibrated, which means the people have to understand where does this feedback place them. So if you and I are talking, Paul, and I say, hey, Paul, hey, you didn't nail that meeting the way I wanted you to. If I don't calibrate that, you're going to spiral down. If I don't say, but don't worry, man, that at this stage of your development, that's right where you should be. Or, hey, Paul, you got to change that, man, because if you don't, that's going to get in the way to promotion. You have to calibrate what that feedback means to that person, because they'll either not take it seriously enough, or they'll go the other way and they'll spiral down with it when you didn't mean them for that to happen. So you have to calibrate. A couple other points. You have to be proportionate. Our research shows, and research I've been doing for the last 3 years now shows, human beings want 5 pieces of positive feedback for every 1 piece of corrective feedback. So you have to be proportionate in the feedback you're giving. You also have to be timely, and then you also have to be tailored. The last point. In life, Paul, there's 3 kinds of people. This is what I found. 3 kinds of people. The first kind of people say, dude, give me the feedback straight. Give me the bad stuff, or I won't even listen to the good stuff. That's me, honestly. The second kind of person is someone who says, give me a compliment sandwich. Say something lovely to me. Then give me the hard stuff. Then say something lovely to me. The third kind of person is the person who says they want the first, but they really want the second, the compliment sandwich. So you just have to know how they want it and tailor your feedback accordingly. That's my power tip for leading down.
All right, I like it. I think I'm probably the second person. Give me the sandwich. Yeah. There's probably a lot of people like me. Okay, so we got leading up, and I'll summarize these in the show notes for folks listening.
Yeah, you got it.
So that's leading up and then leading down. What about leading across?
Okay, this one's sweet and short, and this one I really like a lot. This is now when you're leading, peers where you don't necessarily have influence over. So here's what I want to do, Paul, really quickly. Very simple, short exercise. Think of somebody in your life who had a profound influence on you, but wasn't someone that you reported to in a work relationship, someone that was outside of that, right? And tell me if this is true, because this is what my research is showing me. If you want to have influence over somebody who you have no formal authority over, you do what people that had influence on you in your life have done for you, which is one of 4 things. If they were powerful in your life, they did one of 4 things. They cared, listened, gave you something, taught you something. It's some wonderful wisdom I took from another author that in the middle of researching that said, to me, it's the golden rule of influence. If you show up as caring, listening, giving, and teaching, the odds are you're going to have tremendous influence over your peers. Now, the acid test, Paul, thinking of the person that you were thinking of, I'm betting that person did at least one of those activities. Cared, listened, gave, taught. Is that true?
Yeah, and probably more than one.
Probably more than one. We find on average that, it's 3 out of the 4, someone that really had a big impact in your life. If you apply that golden rule of influence across, I promise you'll be more influential than you ever thought you could be.
I like it. Okay, so we got, and there's a lot more than that in the book, but thank you. I wanted you to give us one concrete tool for each, leading up, down, and sideways. And the rest people can find in the book. And again, the name of the book is Leading from the Middle, a playbook for managers to influence up, down, and across the organization. Scott, tell us where we can find out more about you and find the book.
Thanks so much, Paul. You can go to scottmautz.com, SCOTTMAUTZ.com. The book is Leading from the Middle. And also, Paul, I put something together for your listeners. if they go to scottmautz.com/free tools, no space in between that, just free tools, scottmautz.com, free tools. I have loaded up for them a 30-page workbook that comes along with a book and access to my complete leadership toolkit. So a real bundle of joy to go along with a book that I'm very, very proud of and have been researching for over 3 years.
Awesome.
Years.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much,
thank
Paul.
you for being on the show, and thank you for that generous gift to my audience. And I look forward to diving in more to the book. Thanks, Scott.
Right on, Paul. Go lead from the middle with excellence, my
Will
friend.
do.